Hello and welcome to episode 250 of Quarkus Insights. Today we're going to be talking about what's new with Quarkus Data. I have a spoiler. The first new thing is the name, but we'll get onto that. So we've got a special guest, Steph, to tell us all about Quarkus Data. And I think I can give some backstory here, which is that for at least a year, maybe more, when we're doing the program planning for Quarkus Insights, we sort of reach out to Steph and say, we've been working really, really hard for a really long time on this. You must, why don't you show us what you've got? And Steph says, I've been working really, really hard and I have like a pile of broken code and I can't show you anything because it doesn't make sense. But I think now we have got to the point where you have a pile of slightly less broken code that you're seeking feedback on, and you have a new name and everything. I mean, not you personally, you're still called Steph unless you've changed that.
I've changed legally my name to Fromage.
Yes, excellent. So, yeah, I guess with that we can probably jump in and why don't you tell us what you've been working on and all the developer tears that have gone into this?
Yeah, you have no idea how right you are, because this has been almost 3 years in the making, and it started definitely with a different name. It just started being a feature for Panache, the library of data access that we have in Quarkus, and so it's been a long time, and also. At the moment, everything I'm going to show is relying on the merging of 5 branches that are not on main yet. So, so it's very, very much in flux, but it's definitely moving into a usable and stable and something that looks good direction.
So this is definitely a don't try this at home demo,
No,
because
well, it
actually
won't
it
work.
won't even work.
It really won't work, but it's very close to being finalized. It's moving fast now, and we're getting ready. So it's in the final stages for sure. Um, so what I'm going to show is called Quarkus Data. That's the latest iteration of what used to be called just, it's a new version of Panache. It used to be called Panache 2, then Panache Next, and now it's called Quarkus Data, and it's a new data layer for that solves all the problems we had with Panache 1. Should I switch to slides, or do you want to go do a bit more questions first?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe before we jump into the slides, unless you've got this on the slides, so it sort of fixes all the things that was wrong with Panache, I guess, including the name, judging by the rename. So what was the reasoning behind the name change?
The reasoning behind the name change was that we are focusing, we're integrating here with Jakarta data, which is a new standard which allows us to do type safe queries in a really cool way. And so for the same, I mean, a lot of the people that are familiar with Panache definitely remember the name, and this, they know exactly what we're talking about. But the people that show up on Quarkus and want to look for something to do with data, if they go to code.quarkus.io and they start typing data, they get a lot of things. Same with Hibernate. Those will just show up a lot of extensions. And we're hoping that simplifying the same way we simplified REST-easy reactive to the Quarkus REST name, we were hoping to simplify finding these extensions by calling it Quarkus Data. Plus the fact that they work with Hibernate ORM, Hibernate Reactive, hopefully MongoDB, and everything works under the same umbrella. So that's the reason for the name.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think when you're sort of naming things, there's like 3 extremes. So you can have the sort of the code name like, Twiglet or Panache or Crocodile or whatever that is really memorable, but it's not obvious unless you know what it is. And then at the other end, you can have like the really detailed descriptive names that are like 18 words long, but then those names, they're so long that nobody can actually say them. So then they get shortened or abbreviated. And then you've sort of got like multiple names, only one of which is the approved name. So I think when you have something like this, where you have the opportunity to have like the one word name and it really, really describes what problem is being solved and what's the solution, then I think, yeah, it's sort of a happy place to be.
Right. I will show you types that are 18 words long later. So don't worry, we'll hit that.
We'll get there. Cool. So shall we jump into the slides?
We can. So here.
Cool.
So really very few slides, and they're very boring, but they explain a bit where we're going with this. So a tour of data in Quarkus. As I mentioned, we have a bunch of extensions that deal with data. We have Hibernate ORM, obviously. We have Hibernate ORM with Panache. Then we have Hibernate Reactive, then the same with Panache. MongoDB, the same with Panache. And these are three different libraries that work with different backends, and they're very incompatible, but yet they share, they don't share types, but they share a shape. They each have a type called Panache entity and Panache repository that are incompatible, but they have the same operations. So mixing them is a bit complicated. They were never meant to be mixed. Then we have something called REST with Panache, which exposes the Panache entities over REST APIs. And so if you're used to Panache, this is what it looks like. Mostly you take ORM entity, so you take a class, my entity, you annotate it with entity, this is JPA, and then the Panache bit is that you make it extend Panache entity, which allows you to get all sorts of methods, such as the instance methods for inserting and deleting your entity. You make the fields public, so you don't have to deal with getters and setters. And all the query methods you write as static methods on your class. So that allows you to have a single entry point for finding all the entities of your class. The features that it had, that it still has, right? You get an automatic ID. You don't need to deal with getters and setters. You have instance methods such as persist delete. You have all the helpers out of the box, so you can do find with shortened queries. You can do count, delete, find by ID. You get a very minimalistic type of query called Panache query, which allows you to do counting, paging, projection. You have shortcut queries. You don't need to type the full HQL to do most queries. You have a really easy API to discover, absolutely no boilerplate, and you don't need repositories because everything is in your entity. Now, this is
before you go on.
Yes.
Before you go on to the bad bit, because I was just going to say that, like, when I'm doing live coding, I absolutely love using Panache because there's so, well, I mean, when you're doing live coding, your ability to type just completely disappears, and time sort of expands, so that like one line of code that would seem trivial to type at home is suddenly like, you know, this lifetime for the audience and they're like, so something like Panache that just gets rid of all that boilerplate and gives you something so functional so quickly, really,
Right.
really useful.
Yeah, you type the type of the entity, and you have completion for everything you can do with it. So that's really very useful. But it comes with cost. As I said already, we had separate modules for ORM, Hibernate Reactive, and Mongo. So that was a trouble to maintain, but there was also a problematic for users wanting to mix them. The static methods are hard to mock, so we had to use something special to be able to mock them. It worked, but it was annoying. We only supported managed entities, not stateless entities. If you're familiar with ORM, we have two types of sessions. You have one mode, which is the entity manager, where any changes to the entity is automatically reflected and sent to the database. You have another mode called stateless sessions, where you need to be explicit and call update on your entity to push changes to the database. So we did not support this mode, unfortunately. It was really hard to mix blocking and reactive because they were two different modules. And so you could have a Panache entity for blocking and another one for reactive, but they could not be the same. The typing could also be problematic because the trick we used on static methods on classes was really a trick, and it worked for some cases, but not all of them. So the typing of the queries could be wrong, which was annoying. And the queries were not type safe, obviously. They were strings, and nothing checked them. So we set out to originally on Panache to support a new feature that Hibernate had at the time in 6.3 or 6.4, which was called type safe queries using annotations. And I plugged in all the machinery to add support for them. And it sort of worked. But then we started wanting to actually fix more of the issues that we had and support mixing, reactive, and blocking, and then also add support for stateless sessions. And that took time. And then around that time, Hibernate, the type-safe queries became standardized as Jakarta data in a new specification. And Hibernate ORM also got to be backed by MongoDB through a special JDBC driver. So this became a thing. And all of this sort of converged into adding more and more features to Panache 2, which became Panache Next, which then became Quarkus Data.
How much of this is already in Quarkus? Because I'm just thinking about the coexistence of reactive and blocking, because I think Luca did that a while ago, I thought. So is that is what's in here sort of building on that, or is it
Yes,
different from that?
it's building on that. They what we have at the moment in Quarkus is the support for mixing Hibernate ORM and Hibernate Reactive, with a few rough edges that we're still working on. But what is not there is the support for mixing Panache blocking and Panache Reactive,
Got
because
it. Yeah.
they have different supertypes and they don't mix, and they have different APIs. So this is not solved, and this could not be solved with the existing API, not easily at all.
Yeah. Got it.
So we went to a new module, which is still experimental. It's so experimental that when we merged it in December, it was called Hibernate Panache, as opposed to Hibernate ORM or Hibernate Reactive Panache. So it wasn't just Hibernate Panache. Then, like, a week later, it was renamed to Hibernate Panache Next. And a couple weeks ago, it got renamed to Quarkus Data, but we're still renaming the package names and the type names.
So you're
So
quite
it's-
good at renames now.
Yeah, well, good and bad. We're trying a lot of things, and hopefully, in the end, we'll find what sticks. So it supports mixing all the modes. So you can write your code, whether it's blocking or reactive, whether your entities are managed or stateless, which is, to repeat, a managed entity is something that all the modifications are automatically sent to the database, and the stateless entity is one where you actually need to call update on your entity to send the modifications to the database. So we support all these modes. We support Jakarta data, which I'll talk about in the next slide. We fixed most of the Panache 1 limitations, and I'll show you how. And we also have lots of goodies in the process that we added to it. So Jakarta data, I keep talking about it. What is it? The core of Jakarta data is the ability to write repository as interfaces without having to implement the methods. So, and these are query methods. So here I have two types of queries. I have one annotated with find and one with query. So the one annotated with find is a finder query. The name of the query, the name of the method does not matter. What matters is the return type and the name and types of the parameters. So in this case, we're doing a query that will look at the my entity and find all the rows which match the field parameter. So this is going to translate into something like from my entity, where field equals the value that you pass as parameter. So you can add more than one parameter, they all have to match. You can turn this into a count query by returning a long. You can turn this into a list of my entity to return more than one row. You can do projections, lots of things that are very simplified by this find method. And you have another variant where the query is explicit and you type it as a query. You will notice here that it's not a full HQL query. Normally you would start with from, but here you can do subqueries, no, not subqueries, but query shortcuts, which were introduced in Panache, and that made it to Hibernate and Jakarta data. So here you can do just the where query if you want, and otherwise, this allows you to run an HQL query. Well, not HQL, it's a Jakarta data query language, but that is a subset of HQL, or JPQL. We have a lot of names for query languages. The interesting thing here is that this is type safe, because at compile time, there's an annotation processor which will check that the name of the parameter of the find method, the field, actually exists and maps to a type, a field in the entity, and that it is declared with the right type, so type string. And in the case of query, we will also check that the query is valid, that field exists, that it is assignable to the right-hand side Steph, which is a string. So all this is checked at compile time. So that's nice.
Do you know anything about IDE support? Is it something that, like, in the future, your IDE will give you the tab completion for that?
I think it does. I think we get some completion for the query. I've seen it happen. It still has some rough edges where sometimes it will run the annotation processor and sometimes it will not until Quarkus restarts the compilation. But the errors are reported in the IDE.
Oh, nice.
So you get that. You get completion in the query, which through the I think maybe it's in the ultimate version of IntelliJ, but I'm not entirely sure. But I've seen it break down as well. So it's not entirely clear. What is clear is that once we've made progress into Quarkus Data, I definitely intend to work with the team we have that work on the language server plugins for Quarkus to make sure that we get this all covered, that all the errors are shown, that we get completion, that we also can translate some of the queries that we type through the unsafe API and turn them into type safe, so back and forth. So this is going to be hopefully we'll get really good IDE support.
Nice.
But for now it's a bit rough. So Quarkus Data supports the type safe find and delete methods. So yeah, I showed a find method here, but it could be a delete method as well. Add delete, which will do a deletion based on the same criteria. So you have find and delete methods. You have type safe queries, but you also get paging and sorting, projections. It supports blocking, reactive, and stateless in the version that is out now, which is 1.0. And they're working hard on the version 1.1, which also supports managed entities. And that's demo time. Excellent. So switch to IntelliJ, and I'll show you, I have a little program here. So I'm going to show you all the current state of Quarkus Data on my machine, which is a few days ahead of main. So we have here an entity, a general entity with generated value ID. That's standard JPA. We also have an endpoint, a REST endpoint that doesn't have anything here. So we'll fix this. and do hello endpoint. And hopefully I have Quarkus running here. So if I go back to this here, okay. So I have you can see this, right?
Yes.
So I have my endpoint. Now I want to write a Quarkus data entity. So I go back to my entity and I'm going to make it extend. I'm going to turn this into a managed entity, which is already implicitly the case, depending on the session you use. But I want to make it explicit. And so we have two types of entity. Managed entity and record entity. Record is for stateless, managed is for obviously managed. Because it's a managed entity, this managed entity class doesn't need, it already provides an automatic ID, so I can get rid of this. Now I want to go back to my endpoint here, and I want to list all my entities. So I'm going to change the type of this to a list of my entity. And I'm going to do something to get my entity. So previously we would do my entity in Panache. We would do my entity dot, and then you would get all the queries. We don't have that anymore. But what we have is something else, something easy. We have this thing called the static meta model that is automatically generated by Hibernate, and Quarkus makes sure that this runs. So you get something, my entity underscore, that's the root of your meta model. So here we have a bunch of methods that did not materialize because I did not reload, and IntelliJ decided not to run the annotation processor, but now it ran. So I have these methods, right? I have a bunch of methods here, and I have one called manage blocking, which allows me to get the repository that we used to have with in Panache 1 under my entity dot. But here, because we support all the modes, you have the reactive versions, the blocking, and the stateless versions. So you pick and choose. I want to access it using manage blocking, and then I get exactly the same methods as I had before. So I can use list all here, and that will list all my entities. So, which gives me a list of nothing because I don't have any entities. So, but it doesn't look like it, but that was the plan all along. Now I'm in presentation mode, and I realized that I don't have the left-hand side to give me access to creating a new class. So I'm going to create it here. Hopefully you will move it up. Right, if I do this, yes, yeah.
Easy done. We would have thought that was completely the plan if you hadn't said.
Oh, okay, I should have not said anything.
Yeah, I just, smooth use of IDE.
Right, so I have here a startup class that allows me to create a new entity. So test data, my entity, and I have, I forgot to add a field. Okay, so I have a field here. Yes, create a field, please. That will be very nice, because otherwise I got nothing. And I persist this entity, and then I create another one for Gavin. All right, so we have two entities. Go back here, hit reload. I have my two entities. All right, so same operations as you're used to, different way of accessing it. So you get to pick and choose what you want, but you get a few goodies as well. So Georgios merged a module last week, which allows you to get Quarkus REST support for the Jakarta data types such as sorting and paging. So I'll show you this. Here I can do a query param. Now REST query, that's better. Order of my entity. This is a Jakarta data type. Yes, import it. And if I want to list it, it's supported by the new the Quarkus Data API. And I can go back here and say, if If I hit reload, I'll have the same two. But if I say sort by field, you can see this is sorted by field, the value of the field. So Gavin first, and if I do sort minus field, I get Steph and Kevin. All right. So this is, we used to have a sort class and a page class in Panache 1, and they've been replaced in Quarkus Data by the Jakarta data equivalent of those types. So we're going to add a bunch of methods here. I'm going to show you another method useful, which is going to add an accessor for finding Gavin. And so return my entity, manage blocking. No, why would it do this? So I'm going to run a query here. I'm going to run the query by finding it by field equals Gavin. And I want the first result. So if I go back here, all right, this didn't work because, oh yeah, it needs a different path. I'm used to Ronald where the name of the method is the path. All right, so I have one here, and now I'm going to add another method to start adding entities. So we're going to do something you should never do, which is modify your database in a get method. But this is a demo. We're doing everything wrong.
I do that all the time, also in demos. And the story I tell is that what you're doing is observability, and that's why it's allowed.
Oh, okay. I'm observing myself breaking every rule.
Exactly, something like that.
So the name has to be something sort of useful. So I'm just going to use a count query to say. All right, so each one gets a different name automatically. So what happens if I go here and I try it out with add? This is annoying.
This is how we know it's a live demo.
Missing return statements. My IDE could have told me, it did, but it was like so discreet in highlighting this thing. All right.
That's the disadvantage of live reload, is that those little compile errors, are just hidden in the IDE instead of stopping you from going to the browser.
Right. Okay, so this works, and I'm going to add another method to modify my entities. So this one is called modify, and it will take I should know the name of these types. ID. So modify, that's a path parameter. Query, yeah, okay. No, I said query, but it's not query, it's path. I will get there in the end. So here I need to find my entity. Right, find by ID. Well, this one was smart. Okay, good. And I'm going to modify the field and say the field equals and the field I'm going to append to it. Okay. So many typos. I don't need to persist it. So I'm just going to modify it. So here I'll have to add a few back. No? Huh? Okay. And then I can modify number 3. Okay, it keeps being modified. If I have the list, I see them, I see the ones I added, I see the ones that I modified. All right.
Cool. So this is also something that people shouldn't do in a get query, isn't it?
No, obviously. No. Transactional in a, well, okay. We're going to mandate transactional in get queries, but you should never modify your database in a get query, obviously. But this is so much easier for the demo because I'm using the browser. So here you can see that we're repeating manage blocking all over the place, so that's a bit annoying. If we look at the meta model that I talked to you about that we generate, you can see it's a class that has a bunch of fields. It has a number of repositories that we automatically create. So if you don't, it's a bit like an attorney. If you don't have one, one will be provided for you. So here we have all these repos that are just empty, but they implement the right interface. And then we have all the accessors that allow you to inject all those things. So I could actually go back to my endpoint and say, I'm going to translate this into something that I inject. And the type of this is going to be the 18-word thing for now. Panache mesh blocking repository. Well, it could be this one, but you don't have to know this one. This is the one that we're going to fix. To be precise, that's the we're going to fix. It's going to change. It's going to be, for now, it's definitely a mouthful, but it will change. So now I can replace this with repo. And that's easier, right?
I was gonna ask, when you started doing the modifier or the accessor, or whatever it was, if it could be injected, but I didn't need to because it can.
You can inject the four of them. All right, so now let me show you how easy it is to turn our entity from something that is managed to something that is stateless. And we just do like this. It's a record entity now. And suddenly you should see some red here because we don't have the persist method anymore because this one is called insert. It does strictly the same. This is a big debate, but it's the same as persist. So this explicitly calls insert to insert your entity. And then if you go back here, we also have another instance here. So I turn it into insert, and now we can observe that this keeps working. I can still find Gavin. I can still add a bunch of things. And that could be surprising because we switched the type of the entity, but we did not switch the type of this repository. And so what you're observing here is that you can actually mix the modes of how you access your entity. It's not because this entity is declared as a record entity that you can't access it through a managed repository. So here we kept on using it as a managed repository, but we can also switch to using a stateless repository. And now we can try accessing it entirely as a stateless thing. So let's go back to add. We add a bunch of things. This works. And now let's try modifying this thing. No, modify. I mean it. Modify. All right. And here you don't see it because you don't see it. It's too fast. But I'm hitting reload a bunch of times, and I'm getting always the same modified value. And if I go back to the list of everything, none of them have been modified. And why haven't they been modified? That's because here I just relied on managed sessions to automatically send the update to my database. But that's not the case anymore because this repository is a stateless repo. It's a record repository. So it returns something that is not managed. So I need to call update to send the modifications to the database. If I do this, then I can go back here. I can go to add a bunch of records, modify number 3, and in here you can see it is modified. If I go back to the list, it has been modified. So the change has been sent to the database. So updates are explicit when you're using entities through a stateless session.
Do you think this is going to be something that becomes like a class of bugs where people sort of forget what kind of entity they are and forget to put the update?
Hopefully not. And the goal here is to put both ways of accessing an entity on the same pedestal, because until now the default was managed entity, and accessing an entity through a stateless session has always been either harder or less documented or less
Mm,
easy to get to. And now we're trying um, to push people towards actually trying it out, because it has a bunch of drawbacks, but it also has a lot of advantages.
mm,
So that could be the default for your application. You could also mandate that you only access your entities as managed, or only access them as stateless, or you have some methods that are easier to write as managed, methods that are easier to write as stateless. It's up to you. Um, you can mix and match, pretty much the same way that we support reactive in Quarkus. You could say everything is by default blocking, and then you can make some methods reactive because you need the extra performance or behavior, runtime behavior. So that's the same here. It's up to you.
it almost feels like sort of a candidate for static checking. Like in this example here, if you didn't pass the entity out of it and you didn't call update, it's hard to imagine how that code could be useful. So then you'd sort of want the static to check to say like, are you sure about that?
That
But
would definitely be useful. I'm not sure how easy it would be to do, but that would definitely be useful. Yeah. So,
oh, and we've got well, we had a whole bunch of questions come in on the chat,
all right.
but then Luca answered them all, so I haven't pasted them. But now I'm going to give you the hard one, which is I can't think of a case where it would be beneficial to mix managed and stateless.
Um, so that's really a matter of personal taste. I found in 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 my experience as a web developer, that it was much more intuitive to me to have database operations explicit, and especially I found it very risky that any modification to the database to an entity made by accident would end up in the database without me having to actually call update. And I've had a bunch of those errors in applications, and they were really annoying to find. So I prefer, as a matter of taste, I prefer to actually be explicit as to when I'm sending my operations to the database and calling update. That's something I prefer, and a lot of people actually also prefer that. But in my opinion, that's a matter of taste of how you like to write your applications.
So I think the question is about the mixing.
Oh, the mixing.
Yeah. So like if you and I think the sort of the risk, I guess, is that because you're sometimes explicit
Yeah,
and sometimes not explicit, you forget which you're supposed to be.
yeah. It's not entirely clear yet why you would want to mix.
And I think from an architectural perspective, moving away from those really distinct models to having something that's got more unity at both the back end and the front end is a good thing. But then, then I guess the sort of next question is, okay, but as a user, how do I manage that? And would I ever want to take advantage of that unity? Or would that be an anti-pattern?
I think this is probably something that, I mean, it's new, so
Mm.
we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah. Oh, and we've got so we've got a follow-on of I agree. I'm actually considering switching back to Hibernate because of stateless. What I'm talking about is mixing both in the same code base. Oh yeah, so that we've
Right.
we've just covered that.
So, do I go on, or do you have more questions?
Yep. Nope.
All right. So now I've shown how you can use all the API that you got with Panache 1, so the type unsafe queries and the all the default repository methods that you got with Panache 1. I'm going to show you how you define your own repo and how you can leverage the type-safe queries from Jakarta data. So we go back to the entity, and where we used to have static methods here for all the query methods, now we're going to declare an interface. My repo is going to extend the record repository for my entity, and that's it. And that becomes the name of my repo. And now if I go back to the endpoint, I can use the proper name, myentity.repo, to inject this. It's not parameterized here. And you can see everything just keeps working. It's the same type. If I go here, all the operations still work. Right. So now I have this repo. It has a name. I can start adding methods to it. So for instance, this one I would like to turn into something that is type safe. Ideally, this is what I talked about earlier with support from the IDE. I would have a quick fix here that turns this into type safe, but I don't. So let's see how this goes. So find Gavin. So I create the method. It already has the right signature. And this is going to have to be a query method where, okay, let's do it this way, name equals Gavin. And you can already see one thing. This is where the ID starts to work. And it shows me that this field does not exist. This is not a field that exists. So it's actually called field. And now if I go back to my endpoint, I have the query method and it's type safe. If I go back here, does it still work? Yes, it still works. All right. So we can go on to migrating something else.
Before you do that, we've got more conversation on the benefits of mixing or the disadvantages of mixing. So Lucas says mixing in the same code base is especially useful if you need both of them. And then he adds, it seems like a tautology. The one reason you'd want to mix is if you want to mix. But I think it makes sense that, if you want to give all the users or give the users both possibilities so they can choose, then it may be that, you have different architectural constraints, and it used to be you just couldn't support that. And now you can.
You can. That's before you could not, and now you can. So let's talk about finder methods. So here I would say I want find by name, and I want the name to be Gavin. So now create the method, and that's one where I can write a finder method. This is wrong. It would have to be the field. And this is a find method, so it looks at the parameters, it checks that the parameter exists and maps to a field, and then it's going to generate the right query, pretty much that one, except that the value is given as parameter. So here, if I go back to, what do I need to go back to my endpoint, right, this works, and I go back here, hit reload, yeah, keeps on working. All right, so this is how you start adding methods to your repository, and this is how you inject it, and you get, I can show you an error here. If I go here and I do a typo, you'll get an error reported.
Hooray.
It's hard to see, but no matching field name of field. And this is where the ID would ideally also show it, but it doesn't because it, for some reason, it type checks this, but not this. But this is something we will definitely fix. So we have repositories. How do we add support for reactive programming now with this? Let's see. I told you everything was possible. So now I'm going to show you how easy it is. Go back to this one, and I'm going to say, now I want this method to return a uni. which is the type we use for reactive programming in Quarkus. And I want, so obviously this repository type is a managed blocking repo, so it doesn't support reactive, but we can either create another one that does, or go back to the accessor of the meta model. Well, let's create another one. I want to have another repo for all my reactive operations. So you don't have to, but you can give it a name. So this is a record repository, but it's reactive. Go back to my endpoint, and I want to access. This is why I don't like injection. Takes you out of the flow of your method a lot. Reactive repo. By the way, you have, once you give them names, repo and reactive repo, they also get names in the accessors. So if I go back to the meta model I showed you earlier, here I have repo accessor and reactive repo as well. Well, it's not compiled, but once the annotation processor runs, it will work. So here, okay, and this is because in Hibernate reactive, we need transactional even on get methods, even on accessing methods. So here, what I'm showing is that, it has the name of this, but obviously you can just use the injected version if you prefer. That's a reactive repository. It has all the same operations than the other ones, except it's reactive because it extends record repository.reactive. So using reactive, mixing and matching reactive programming and blocking is really trivial here.
And that's something that I think it's definitely easy to find a use case for as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that really depends on the runtime behavior of the method that you have. If you want to have a reactive method because it's under certain stress situations, or it has some latency or what's it called again? This back thingy.
Oh, back pressure.
Right. So that's a mix and match. Or you can make everything reactive, but I don't think we have a good use case for that. Mostly is going to be blocking. Everything is fine by default, and the few methods that you need to be reactive for performance reasons, then you can trivially make them reactive. So again, here we can really mix and match everything, and we can this works also. All the type-safe methods work with this. It's lying. This actually works. See, the IDE is not there yet, but this actually works. So the last thing I wanted to show is, well, it's a bit of a gimmick, but it's interesting as well. I showed you here how we get support for ordering, and we also get the same for paging. So here I can pass page request. And call, well, I'm going to have to resort to the final, which returns a Panache query, and we have two new methods here called pages for paging and limits for ranges and limits. So I'm going to here to pages with this request. Yeah, this one, page, and return list. So this is using the out-of-the-box find all method with the Panache query. If I go back here and I say add a bunch of times so that I can justify pages, I go back to the list method. I'm getting something, which is unknown service. Okay, this is bleeding edge. This is a bug that we found last week and we're fixing. And it's one of those bugs where if you restart, it's fixed. for a given value of fixed, it's fixed. for demos, it's fixed. So here, so I have a bunch of things, and I can say sort by field, and page equals 2, size equals 4, and now we can say page 1. That's page 1. So you can see this is using the type unsafe version, but I could say, well, I'm going to create a new method for it using the type safe API, make it simpler, and hopefully I get a quick fix. Yes, create method, and that's a find method. And it just works because the signature is enough to say what this does. This is going to find all my entities because it has 0 fields that match, but it has 2 interesting parameters, which is the order and the page request, and the type is already specified. It's fine. So now if I hit reload, this will keep on working. Well, I only get 1 page, sure. But if I added more, then it would show right here, size 4, size 2. So you can see turning your type unsafe queries from the Panache side of the API into the Jakarta data API and making things type safe as you go along is something that I think will be very useful, because you can start, well, coding your API through completion and making it very easy with type unsafe things. And then hopefully you can translate those into type safe queries and type safe finders, so that you're sure that updating your application will not break those queries once you're happy with them. And hopefully the IDE will get you completion and quick fixes to turn from one to the other. So that's how I expect the flow of writing an app would be. Well, at least if an AI is not writing it, because that's another thing. And I think that's the end of my demo. So I can go
Cool.
back to the slide page. Oh yeah, what's coming next? It's still very much in flux. We're still renaming things. So what I showed you with I showed you a bunch of types that still had Panache in it that were 18 words long. We're renaming those. The managed entity and record entity are still in a PR. They're not named like this in main, but we're hopeful that they work. I know Johan still had reservations about managed entity because Hibernate has an implementation type that is named this way, which is annoying, but I don't think it's. We're going to try it. We've tried a bunch of names, and these are the less worse than we found.
Naming is the hardest problem in computer
Unless
science.
you have no idea, because everybody's using the same names for
Yeah.
things that we would like to use, and we
Yeah.
want something that is intuitive, but also not taken by 100 things. So there's a lot of compromise to be made
Yeah.
here. But this is better than we had 2 weeks ago, and maybe in 1 week what we'll have will be even better than this. So we're renaming types a lot, but the functionality is there. The API still needs a bit of polishing. But again, it's everything is already based on a lot of the work that we had with Panache 1 and based on Jakarta data, which is very polished. But we're still at the point where it's very experimental and moving, and yet it's very interesting, and we need feedback from people who of all sorts, people who don't want to use it. That's valuable to
Mm.
know why. People that would be interested but are not going to touch it at this time, and they want to give us some ideas, that would be great. People that want to try it and see what's wrong with it or what's great with it, that would be also nice. So all sorts of feedback. You don't need to install it to give us feedback, but if you do, then that's great.
And so in terms of naming, is 337 the first one where it's called Quarkus Data? Or was that in earlier versions as well?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I pushed to main, and then magic people like Guillaume turn those into releases every once in a while, and I'm really not following.
Yeah, I slightly lose track of the numbers as well, but I think because of course people may be watching this in the future, at which point it will be useful for them to know when our present is. And 336 has come out, and 336 came out a few weeks ago, and 337 has not yet been released. So I think if you push to main within the last few weeks, probably it will be 337 will be the first
It
version.
doesn't appear to be in 336 if I ask code.quarkus.io. So that would be in 337.
Yeah, cool. And then even in 337, people may find some package renames and
Right.
class
The
renames and that kind of
packages
thing.
are going to be renamed.
Yeah. And so just to confirm, Douglas Adams says that he's going to take his mission critical system into production with it. And is that a good idea?
Obviously, no.
Yeah. So thank you, Douglas. And then we've got another question as well. How does paging work? Is the page size guaranteed to return n entities when you join one-to-many? Or is it just a simple offset and limit?
So no, I think I mean, I haven't really checked, so I'm not entirely sure. Gavin would be able to confirm this, but I think it translates into limits and offsets. But you have another mode of paging, which is interesting, which I haven't talked about, which is cursors, which is slightly safer relative to people injecting and modifying your records as you're browsing them. But even that, I don't think answers the question of how paging works with regards to um, joins. And I don't think I can answer that. I would have to try it to see.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's one that if people really need to know, then a discussion on Quarkus IO or a question on Zulip would get a more detailed answer.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. And I think that's it for questions. So yeah, thank you everybody for lots of questions and discussion, and thank you, Luca, for answering most of the questions before I could pass them on to Steph. Super efficient.
Thanks, Luca.
And I think with that, unless there's any last call for hard questions for Steph.
Why hard? Easy
Well,
questions are fine as well.
yeah. No. So people don't come on Quarkus Insights to get an easy ride. They come on Quarkus Insights to get
Fair enough.
the hard feedback from our community. That's the value is passing on the hard questions. But I think we've run out of hard questions. So with that, yeah, we're done for today. Please do, as Steph says, please do try it out. Positive feedback, always nice to hear. But also, if something doesn't work for you, then please let us know. Please raise a defect, and then we can fix it for everybody else. And if the whole shape of it just doesn't meet your needs, that's also really, really useful to know. So
Yes.
yeah, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Steph. And we'll
Thank
see
you
you
very
all
much.
next week.